I'm Will from the Kite Factory. For those who don't know us, we are predominantly a media planning and buying agency. We work with quite a large number of charities. They make up a large part of our client base. So as part of that, we do quite a lot of research into the latest audience trends and behaviours, types of products and ways people are interacting with charities in the market. And this is one of the kind of latest pieces of research that we've conducted. As Allan says, there is a larger document that will accompany this report, but today I'm just going to share with you a few of the top line findings and kind of guiding principles that we've come across. And then I'll be handing over to Caroline after about 10 or 15 minutes to talk with Emily from the VHF about how some of this theory is put into practice. Great, yes, so here was our provocation. How could we sort of unlock this high value heartland of legacy givers that Allan's just introed there? So our project really is aimed at kind of capturing this growth. Of course, with this audience, I probably don't need to remind you of the numbers for the legacy market, but it is an area of huge growth for charities, set to be worth 4.7 billion by 2029. So there's huge financial incentive that we make sure we get this right and speak to the right people in the right sort of ways. And one of the questions, as Allan's mentioned, that we were trying to answer was whether everybody gives in their will in equal measure, or are some audiences in fact more valuable than others. So Allan worked, as he said, with Smee and Ford and pored over all of the financial data to look back from 2012 up to 2019 at who kind of gives how much. And as he said, this research uncovered that there is indeed, as we probably always had suspicions, that a core group is responsible for a significant proportion of legacy giving each year. And in fact, the numbers are quite stark. So, in 2019, about 6,000 people left 1.5 billion pounds in legacies, which is, roughly equivalent to half of all legacy income in the market coming from, quite a small group of people. So we really set out to answer, who were these people and how can we encourage them and people like them to give in the future? And we broke this down into 4 questions for our research. So first of all, can we identify this group in the wider UK population? What criteria might we use to try and define them? And then can we size this group? How big is this potential audience across the UK? Once we've done that, we looked at the types of people they are, what charitable behaviours do they already exhibit, and what other characteristics do they have as people? And finally, being a kind of media planning and buying agency, we always finish looking at their media behaviours to start to uncover how we should start to communicate with these people, which media channels do they use, and what kind of advertising do they tend to interact with. So to start off with question 1, we identified some kind of leading indicators for legacy consideration in the UK public. So we went out to all of the quantitative panel data that we have as a media agency. We have access to these large surveys of the UK population and their kind of behaviours and attitudes and demographics. And we used this question around considering leaving a gift to charity in my will as our initial sense check, and then try to uncover other sort of demographics and characteristics of people that might help us create an audience that would be easier to sort of target and speak to in media. And we uncovered some key characteristics that none of them should come as a particular shock, but we've put some rigor behind it. So we can see here, we've indexed here against the UK population. So the first one here, we can see that taking part in voluntary work is a really significant indicator of whether somebody would consider leaving a gift to charity in their will. So an index of 184, meaning they're sort of 84% more likely than the average person to consider leaving a legacy to a charity in their will. Other factors that were really important as well were being a member of a charitable organisation of some format, donating to a charity on a regular basis. So a clear running theme for those first 3 of being already a kind of committed supporter of a charity in some way. And there are some other more demographic characteristics as well. So, they tend to not have children. That's another kind of leading indicator for this high value group, at least. And, they're financially secure, so they own their home outright. And what we did then is we sort of combined these factors. I should say, sorry, there's some questions coming in, so I think we'll probably try and take them all at the end after Caroline's section. So what we did was take all of these factors, these leading indicators that we'd uncovered, to create a kind of single target audience. So from a demographic perspective, we included people that don't have children and own their home outright. We also wanted to include a kind of age verifier as well, broader than people that might imminently be leaving a will, but also not so young that it seems like, a distant prospect for them. So we found that out to be around sort of 55 plus as the sweet spot. From an attitudes perspective, we included that leading indicator around people that say they would definitely consider leaving a gift to charity in their will. And then, as mentioned, there are some key charity behaviours that are really important. So these are people that we've included who already give regularly, or a member of an organisation, or volunteer for a charity. And then once we've added all of those criteria, that enables us to size the audience. So based on the survey data that we've used, we can see that there are around 530,000 people in the UK who fit the criteria that we'd selected. If we take into account the mortality rate for this age group, around 6,200 of them will be leaving a will each year, which is a very close match for that kind of 6,000 people a year who are leaving these high value legacies. So we really felt that we were kind of aligned here with that sweet spot of the audience. So this was the definition that we took forward for the rest of our research. So we then went and had a look at some of their behaviours. As I said, what kind of people are these? So as mentioned, we know that they're highly engaged with charities. So we broke that question out for you. So as we said, it was kind of people who are regular givers or members of an organisation or volunteers. So this is how that data breaks out. So in fact, in that group, around 80% of them are regular givers. 70% of them say that they're a member of some organisation. This is claimed data, so they will just be asked by the survey, are you a member of a charitable organisation? They will select yes. So it's kind of up to the interpretation of the person who's responding to the survey, but that could include things, like National Trust and the Tate and things like that as well. And then around half of them, in fact, volunteer with charities as well. So we know that they're already highly engaged and exhibiting charitable behaviours before this point. And we know that they donate to a large number of charities. So this is comparing our group with UK adults and looking at the number of charities that they donate to. So you can see, across the board, they're donating to a significantly larger proportion, apart from one charity and one alone. You can see there the grey bar for that one on the first part is higher for the UK adults, but then after that, our audience are exhibiting the characteristics we want, and you can see there that at 10 plus, significantly more. So we know that these are people who are speaking to and being spoken to by many different charities. So it's important that you're getting your message out there to sort of stand out from the crowd. We also know, thinking more about who they are as people beyond charities, that they're a particularly inquisitive and informed group. So we looked at some attitudes that they have about, their general outlook on life. They would say, this is again looking at statements they agree with versus the rest of the population. 2/3 of them think it's important to continue learning new things and that it's important to be well informed about the world around them. And they have a wide range of passion points as well. So many of them are interested in the arts and many interested in nature as well. So we can see here significantly higher numbers of them saying that they definitely agree with these statements. There are a wide range of different passion points and interests that we can tap into to resonate with this group. And then thinking about, their kind of purchase behaviours, we can see that they're particularly discerning people. So I think it's important to provide plenty of information. They like to research things, they like to find out about them, explore them from different angles. So making sure that all of the information is there that they would like when making significant decisions. So starting from the left, as far as possible, they like to have a kind of tangible experience with something. So being able to sort of feel and touch it and have that kind of physical experience before making a purchase, however we might want to address that from a legacy perspective. They like to discuss major decisions with their partners. You know, they will go away and speak to the significant people in their life about large decisions. They like to check a number of different sources. So they do lots of research and, you know, explore things. And as mentioned, kind of with that first criteria, their human interaction is really important for them as well. So as far as possible, you know, encouraging person-to-person experiences rather than it just being sort of digital. And then thinking more broadly about financial decisions, as we've seen, they're quite discerning purchasers and like to research. They are also financially particularly savvy, or at least consider themselves to be. And they like to give large financial decisions plenty of consideration, which probably won't come as a surprise. So they consider themselves particularly good at managing their money. They like to think about it for a while before they make any significant outlays, and consider themselves to be regular savers. So very much in keeping with their purchase behaviours, you know, they do give things due consideration and consider themselves good at this type of thing. So it's important that we give that kind of due respect when speaking to them. And then moving on to thinking about the media channels. So we've had a look here at some of the key media channels across the market, and the survey data kind of groups people into different quintiles, so 5 different groups, depending on the amount of time that you spend with a particular media channel, to kind of give you an indication of whether this person is a heavy user of that channel or a light user versus the rest of the population. And again, we've indexed here against UK adults in general, and just ranked some of the top 6 here. So unsurprisingly, magazines and newspapers as an older audience come out particularly strongly. So more than twice as likely the average person to be a heavy consumer of magazine media, 1.5 times for newspapers. They really like to interact with mail as well. So this physical print media really coming through quite strongly, and other traditional channels too. So radio and live television are also particularly important for this group. I think what's very important to remember though is that they're not lagging behind on their use of the internet. So 100 is exactly the average. So they're bang on with the UK public in general for their kind of use of internet for browsing. So, you know, they're definitely not behind from a digital perspective. So just to delve into those in a little bit more detail then. So as mentioned, they're particularly receptive to print messages. So on the left-hand side, you can see that they've said magazine and newspaper ads help me to make purchasing decisions, and over 1/3 of them definitely agree with that statement. These kind of questions always have to come with a bit of a pinch of salt. People like to consider themselves impervious to advertising, so we do usually see quite low scores. So it's actually, in fact, particularly stark for this group that they are actually answering these questions in some numbers. So they are very, very receptive to these channels. Then thinking about mail as well, a similar picture. So once opening some mail, they tend to interact with it in many different ways. So they're likely to discuss it with somebody else in person, or go online to research it. As we've seen already, they are research heavy purchasers, so they do go and find out more about a product or a service. And then particular of interest is that, you know, this making a purchase or donation. So over half of this group say that they've gone on to make a purchase or donation following reading a piece of mail, which is, you know, a very, very high number indeed versus the UK, you can see there. But as I said, it's important to remember that they are actually active online as well. So this is looking at some of the types of things that they buy online on a regular basis. So you can see that many of them are avid purchasers of books. So nearly 1/3 of this audience say that they regularly purchase books online, which is almost twice as high as the rest of the population. And they conduct their finances online slightly more than the rest of the UK average on a regular basis. So doing insurance and other financial administration on there. And they're also more likely to be booking their holidays. So we can see that it's important to think that they are actually active online, while some of those traditional media channels do still dominate for them. But of course, they are slightly older, and with that, they are slightly more cautious and wary than perhaps a teenager would be with their data and with who they're interacting with online. So I think it's very important that messaging and requests for information should be timely and well explained. So many of them find advertising on social media to be intrusive, and others say that, you know, they're worried about their personal information online not remaining secure And as we've seen, they are, particularly discerning and savvy purchasers. So I think it's important that when we do interact with them and request information, that's done in the appropriate way to make them feel secure. And of course, they still like to watch television in the more traditional ways. So you may hear many things in the market about TV being dead or its days are numbered, but certainly for this audience, that isn't the case. Nearly half of them overwhelmingly prefer to watch TV at the time it's broadcast. And then looking at some of the newer ways of consuming video content, they are far behind the kind of UK average in terms of their adoption of these newer platforms. So 16% say they have a Netflix account and 14% have an Amazon Prime account, which is some way behind the curve for others. So for a TV perspective, it's still the live linear fashion that dominates for this group. So that was a fairly whistle-stop tour of some of the research. As mentioned, there will be a full report, and of course we can go and consult the data to find out any other questions that people may have. But in summary, as a starting point for learning about this audience, we have been able to kind of identify them in the UK population using a few different criteria from demographics and behaviours and attitudes. We've sized that out to be around 500,000 people for the potential audience we should be speaking to about this kind of service. And we know, of course, that they are highly engaged with charities already across a number of different touch points. They're intellectually curious and financially savvy as a group, so due consideration there. And from a media perspective, they're particularly receptive to print media and heavy TV viewers preferring live television. But they are also very active online, as much so as the rest of the UK population. So given the value of this group, I think it's important, for fundraisers to ensure that they're constantly communicating with this group and maintaining, a kind of conversation with them. This communication should be regular to ensure that the consideration is earned over time. As mentioned, they are discerning and like to do due consideration for big decisions like this. So it's important that an organisation remains front of mind when it comes to the all-important decision. And then, as mentioned, this paper was really just to confirm some of the long-held beliefs about this audience and start putting some strategic rigor and data behind these long-held hunches. And we hope that these findings will lead to a greater focus on this audience across all different aspects of marketing, from product development and messaging and creative and supporter experience, as well as just the media, which I've given you an intro to here. So I'll now hand over to Caroline.
Thank you, Will. So just to briefly introduce myself again, so I'm Caroline and I'm Head of Business Management for the Charity Division here at the Kite Factory. So the agency has been working with many clients over the years, supporting in legacy delivery. So I'm really pleased to be introducing Emily East, who is Legacy Development Manager at the British Heart Foundation. So thank you so much, Emily, for joining us today. And I wanted to take the opportunity within this webinar to discuss some of the key insights that really may help in developing a high value legacy programme. So Emily, first off, really interested to find out what BHF have learned about this high value audience, and what key indicators have you found from your own database on who they actually are?
Yeah, great question. Firstly, hello everyone. Hope you're well, and probably more importantly today, hope you're warm. I've got a blanket on, which is great that you can't see, so that's really helped me today. We've done some work on insight into our own high value pledges, so we've got our own insights that I'm going to be sharing today. So in answer to your question, Caroline, the summary is that we broadly found quite similar things. So for us in 2019, 45% of our total legacies came from 6.5% of our legators. So very, very similar data to what Allan and the Kite Factory picked up on. And we identified that in the past 5 years, it was just 50 individuals that equated to half of BHF's legacy income. So again, showing what value they contribute. In terms of who they are, again, the hunches that we all suspect, things like single women, people without children came true, as well as people living in the southeast, again, unsurprising because of the value of their properties. But something surprising that came through in our data was those 50 individuals I talked about, the most common title they had was doctor, which I guess is unsurprising considering we're a medical research charity, but it's not something we'd necessarily linked as them being our high value legacy audience. And it's also when we looked at our bedfellow charities in the high value space, of all the people who had the job title doctor, 1 in 3 of them had also left a high value gift to cancer research. So again, it shows that those people are interested in that cause in particular. And what we did with our data was we overlaid it with acorn groups, and we found that 50% of those 50 individuals sat within these 2 groups called mature money and executive wealth. And what we learned about them, again, is very, very similar to what the Kite Factory presented, which is they're very financially savvy. They're also very financially sophisticated as well. And they generally have a relationship with either a solicitor or a financial advisor. And particularly with the mature money group, they're asset rich. So again, they might not be your typical in life high value individual, but they have those assets, hence why they're able to give that high value gift to charities. The one thing we did find, though, that was quite different to the Kite Factory's findings was about how charity minded they are. So of the 50, the people that we knew about before death, only 20% of those were one-off or regular givers, and how they did that really varied. So there was some who gave a small amount for 50 years and some who gave, oh, sorry, I just had an interruption, but I'll carry on. And there were 3 one-off, like £4,000 donations. So very, very varied. So I think the key takeaway for me is that these individuals are charitably minded, but not necessarily actively giving to your charity or in a way that you know about. So maybe an interesting takeaway just to bear in mind there.
That's really, really interesting. I think when you start peeling away the demographics and really getting under skin, they're a really fascinating audience, aren't they? So in terms of legacy fundraising, I think we all know that so often people are leaving a gift in their will and not telling the charity beforehand. So is there anything that you've learned at the BHF that you, in any way that you can improve this?
Yeah, and what was interesting with the high value audience of ours is that normally it's roughly 50% we don't know, but with high value, it was 72% of that high value audience that were unknown to us before death. So huge. So the insight work we did can't say, right, well, here's why they aren't telling us, but we know the general barriers are things like they're worried that we're going to over communicate and bombard them, that they might have pressure from us to increase their gift. Often that it's private, and the key barrier being that people don't understand why the charity wants to know. So I guess there could be a whole, 1 hour long presentation on, my 10 cents into, how do we help them understand why, and what could good stewardship look like in order to sort of make them trust more. But what I think it shows is the value in stewardship journeys and how, making sure your supporters trust you, they know that they'll listen to you, and they can be stewarded in the way that they want. And crucially, that they know sort of what's in it for them. So I guess this is where there could be an argument for a bespoke high value journey. Why should they tell us that they've left us a gift in the will? And you don't want to say like, well, here's some, shiny things for you, but we treat high value in life audiences in a particular way. So what's to say we couldn't do that for high value legacies as well? So I think there's just it's not just here's how you get people to tell you, but it's about the journeys you take them on and building trust between them and the charity.
Yeah, and thinking of that from a wider perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in terms of media, we obviously know which specific channels are really good to reach this audience, but I think what's a really important point is that communication and messaging within that media. So is there any insights that you found that you'd like to share with the group in terms of what messages are really important?
Yeah, again, a lot of it is kind of from what we found from the insight, what our sort of assumptions are. So the big assumption that we want to make is, we know lots about them being financially sophisticated. So our traditional value exchange products probably aren't ideal for them. So, a free will or a guide, is that the thing that someone that's financially sophisticated and savvy is going to make them find out more? They're probably going to go and have that conversation with their solicitor. But what I think it does show is what the role is of consideration, both in the cold and the warm space. So how are you getting people, whether they're warm to charity or they're completely unknown, to consider leaving a gift in their will to your charity? And, you can do that through a massive media campaign, but you could also, if you don't have budget, what are other parts of the charity, who are they communicating to, and what stories are they telling, and what are they saying that you know, your charity does, and how can you demonstrate the impact that gift symbols either currently have or could have on your work? And basically, how do you get this audience to start thinking, oh, okay, leaving a gift in my will to them is worthwhile? And the other thing, and that Will talked about, was the whole inquisitive nature. So I think as well in the messaging, how can you appeal to that? So how can you give them in-depth stories, or tell them, you know, new things they didn't know about, or even in particular channels? Because as we found out, they like a mix of channels, which is exactly the same as what we found. So how are you saying, oh, find out more, or, you know, come along to this event to hear this, or let's have a conversation? So how are you making sure in your messaging you're helping them get a real detailed understanding of the work you do in the way that they want it?
Yeah, and absolutely, it's bringing that proximity to the cause that's really, really important. I know this is a whistle stop, very few questions that we can get through in the time. So in conclusion, Emily, is there any kind of final advice that you could give other charities who are thinking about investing in this particular group? And I think another really important thing is how you can get that buy-in internally as well.
Yeah, buy-in internally is so crucial. And I think the caveat we've got is we've got a lot of insight, but we haven't done the, okay, and this is what we're going to do about it, because it will involve so many people. So we haven't got the answers. But in terms of that buy-in piece, I think there's two really key things that you can use to get that buy-in. One is stating that the legacy high value audience is so different to the in-life high value audience. So work that Allan and Fastmap did recently, and Allan, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but they said something like people with assets of over £1 million, only 12% of those people said they were either financially comfortable or felt you know, affluent. So that even if they have all this money, they might not feel it. So I think it's crucial to say to your charity, we shouldn't just be going after who traditionally looks rich, or that we can just tag on to the philanthropy program and just say, oh yeah, and then we're going to ask them for a legacy. That they are a completely different audience that you need to tackle on its own way. And the second bit of advice is where you can put a target on it and monetize it. We know with legacy investment, you've got to do a lot of convincing, not because of the returns, but because of the long-termism of it. So with high value, can you put a target of, say, if you got one more a year, what would that be? What we're going to probably do is, so we know 28% of our gifts we know about. So we've said, what if we double that, and what could potentially would that income bring in? So that's kind of, again, how you can get buy-in. And I think the big thing is emphasize the opportunities now. We know so much that we're seeing such a large transfer of wealth. And I think, as Rob himself says, if you don't invest now, you're going to be left behind. So this is the time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is the time to do it. Obviously, a completely fascinating topic. We could carry on for the rest of the afternoon, but in the interest of time, I just want to say a big thank you, Emily, for sharing your insights. And